Well, here we are riding the Sugar House trolley again.
This is always fun. I love it.
This is fun. And if you've been watching the channel, you know that anytime we're on the Sugar House trolley, it's because we're chasing the railroads of John W. Young.
Oh, yes.
And when last we left, we were at the Baldwin Radio Factory. We're moving on now. We're not getting very far. No, we're going to go about 200 feet on our journey to Park City.
Central Point.
This week we're making it all the way to Southeast Furniture Company. Do you remember Southeast Furniture Company?
All of our house was furnished with furniture from Southeast Furniture.
Everybody bought furniture at Southeast. It was what you did. And after World War II, this became incredibly lucrative for the Sorensens who owned Southeast Furniture because there was the housing boom and the baby boom and the bomb boom. No, that was the war. But all these different booms. And if you're having babies and buying houses, you need furniture.
Yeah.
And who happens to be in the furniture business? The Sorensen family. And there they are, Southeast Furniture.
Right.
Well, and it was a fun place as kids. We like every Christmas we had to go down there and see the Christmas window display.
Yeah, that was always fun.
They paid a fortune to have a custom Christmas window display made up every year by some company in the Midwest who made little robot elves and stuff with Santa Claus and the whole thing. It was amazing.
It was.
And the Sorensens were making a lot of money, so much so that they bought what could loosely be described as a mansion.
Oh, wow.
On acreage. A few hundred feet from Garage Mahal, as it turns out. Garage Mahal is a block away from their mansion.
That is crazy.
And they had all this acreage around there because Mr. Sorensen wanted to raise horses. And he had a horse track and a huge barn, and he did the horse show circuit. He loved all of that, but he tired of it quickly and kind of gave that up and started collecting antiques instead. I think the horses kind of led to that because while he was growing horses and raising horses, he started collecting carriages. And that led to him collecting Pioneer era antiques.
Oh, wow. So that's how that happened.
That's how that happened. So he kind of, first he buys a carriage, then he buys a hearse, then he buys a fire wagon, then he buys a, and all these different wagons and carts and carriages and so on. And the next thing you know, well, he's going to buy a bedroom set, and then he's going to buy an entire butcher shop interior. And well, pretty soon the horses got kicked out of the barn because the barn was filling up with antiques.
Oh, wow.
And pretty soon it's like, well, now I've got thousands of really cool antiques and carriages and stuff, but I don't have any way to display them.
Yeah, we've all been there.
We've all been there. And all your stuff's in boxes. Sounds like Garage Mahal.
Yeah,
and you'd like to dig the stuff out and play with it.
Exactly, have it out. There's my three-handled family credenza.
Absolutely. So, what did Mr. Sorensen do? He bought a village.
Oh my.
Well, what better way you've got all the stuff to populate a village, and you got the money to do it. And the village of Rockport was kind of for sale. It was kind of for free, is what it was. They built the Wanship Dam and Reservoir, and that was going to inundate Rockport. And so he just asked for permission to take it home, and they said sure. So he went up there with trucks and stuff and loaded up the whole town.
Thank you for writing UTA.
And hauled it to his mansion there on Connor Street, about that far from Garage Mahal.
Wow.
And out past the third swimming pool, as they say it was a mansion, so you went past the 3 swimming pools, and on about 3 acres was the town of Rockport.
I see.
And then that gave him a place to set up all of the various antiques, the butcher shop, the barber shop, the dentist's office, the clock shop, the stove shop, the blacksmith, all of the things, because he'd been collecting all those antiques. Now he had a way to display them in his backyard. And it was his personal toy to go out into his little town and dress it up and, dust off the family credenza.
Oh my.
But I think he realized at a certain point in time that he was going to not outlive his village.
Probably.
And so he donated the whole thing to the Utah Sons of Pioneers. He was a member, and in fact, I think at that time he was the president. And so he gave the house, the mansion, the 3 swimming pools, the land, and the entire village to the Sons of Utah Pioneers.
Wow.
Who couldn't afford to keep it.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Because it was, how do you maintain a thing like that?
Yeah, or add to it, or
So the members were all ponying up all this money to try to keep the thing running. They opened it to the public, and as kids, we would go over there, and for 75 cents, you could go inside.
Right.
But they were losing thousands of dollars. And so they decided to sell the whole darn deal. They put the land and the mansion up for sale and sold that to a real estate developer. And the village, they were going to try to relocate that actually to Sugar House Park.
That's crazy.
But the city kind of backed out on that, and then they were going to move it to This Is the Place Monument and State Park, and that fell through. They wouldn't do that. And the local amusement park, Lagoon, just offered them a chunk of change and said, we'll take it.
Bring it here.
Bring it here.
Oh, wow.
And they'll pay for all the moving. They just wrote them out a check, bought the whole darn village,
Oh my gosh.
and moved it to the amusement park in Lagoon. And that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
We're going to Lagoon to see Sorensen's village, the little Rockport village, with all of his amazing antique collection, which is now on display 30 miles or so from where he originally built it in Farmington.
Yeah.
So check it out.
Right.
Pioneer Village, Sorensen's hobby town. The Lagoon Amusement Park is a good-sized amusement park along the Wasatch Front. Interestingly, where most amusement parks started off owned by a family and are now owned by a corporation, Lagoon started off being owned by a corporation, in this case the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad, and is now owned by a family. Pioneer Village has been an integral part of the Lagoon Amusement Park now for 40 years. Sort of a fixture here, yet a lot of people don't really know how it got here or what its history is, and it's a fascinating history. The history of the entire Lagoon Amusement Park is equally fascinating. After all, the park's been around now for 130 years, and so, well, a lot has happened here. Lagoon opened as the Lake Park Amusement Park on the Great Salt Lake, just west of where it currently is, in 1886. It was built by the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad. Railroads were an important part of amusement parks, as that's how you got to the amusement park back then. In 1895, the park was moved to its current location. Here's the Lake Park Pavilion at the new site of Lagoon in Farmington. Notice the cupola here on the top of the building. That's all that remains now. The rest of the pavilion was torn down just a few years ago, and here's the cupola where it currently stands in the Lagoon Amusement Park. By then, the ownership of Lagoon had transferred to the Salt Lake and Ogden Railway Company. It was common for railroads to own amusement parks back then. Here's the train tied up at Lagoon on the platform. Here's the platform as it appears today at the Lagoon Amusement Park. A little tiny part of the original fencing for the platform still exists. Later, the Bamberger Railroad took over Salt Lake and Ogden, and they electrified the entire line, and they kept ownership of Lagoon. They really did a lot of build out at Lagoon and turned it into a much bigger and much nicer park. And they added this incredibly cool little steam train ride to the park. Wow, I love this thing. This is a great train ride. In 1952, the park was bought by a family, the Freed family of Salt Lake City. They had car dealerships and wanted to get into the amusement park business, so they really started building out Lagoon, making it a real fun spot. They also promoted concerts. This is the Monkees, but Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, a lot of major bands played here at Lagoon. The Beach Boys became a regular fixture at Lagoon. They even wrote a song about the place. How cool is that? The park has continued to evolve to its present day. There's still a lot of the older rides here, but for the most part, it's a typical modern amusement park full of roller coasters. I prefer the cool older stuff, like Pioneer Village here. Pioneer Village was added in 1976 as a bicentennial project. They spent millions of dollars moving this up from the Sorensen house and putting it here. They added a lot of new buildings to it to hold more of the antiques, as the original old buildings just couldn't hold the entire collection. But most of the buildings here are from the Sorensen home. This is the Colville Church. It had been moved to Sorensen's and then it got moved up here. And it gave a nice place to house the more religious artifacts that had been collected by Sorensen. Sort of a typical Mormon church of the 19th century. Here we have a kind of typical Victorian gingerbread house from the late 19th century. The Industrial Revolution had made a lot of money for some people, and boy were they showing it off. Victorian homes were quite the spectacle back in the 1890s. This was kind of a new thing, the American middle class. Before that, just a very, very few people held all of the money. But by the late 1900s, a lot of people who had been working in the factories and so on found themselves doing quite well financially. And they were able to start living like the other half did. Sorensen had collected a lot of finery from that era. Look at this beautiful office. And our favorite thing, toys. Toys really took off in the era because for the first time, a lot of people were able to buy toys for their kids. Of course, not everybody was living the high life in the Industrial Revolution. This is actually an example of an earlier lifestyle. This is the classic one-room cabin. It's an example of a typical American home. And this is an example of a typical American school of the era, a one-room schoolhouse. All the kids met in a single room, all of the grades together, and one teacher teaching all of them. Sorensen's main focus back then was collecting small businesses, the classic American Main Street. This is, of course, a print shop demonstrating the rather primitive technology of printing in the 19th century. And here we have the village cobbler, the shoe repair shop. And no town would be complete without at least one general store. I sort of suspect that this would have been one of Sorensen's favorite buildings because there's so much just stuff that he could have collected to stick on the shelves. And although he put a price tag on everything, that doesn't mean it's for sale, does it? After the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, these kind of stores really took off. In Salt Lake City, we even saw ZCMI, the world's first department store. For the first time, it was possible to get goods to the people in the West. I doubt very much that many small Western towns had a apothecary the size of this drugstore. But since Sorensen collected a lot of this stuff, well, his drugstore was pretty darn big. here we have a tinker and stove shop. Sorensen loved ornate coal stoves. Check this one out. Not many homes would have had a stove quite this ornate, but in Sorensen's collection, well, they're just sort of commonplace. And of course, even the smallest little backwater would have had a blacksmith shop. The gun tools here all belonged to John Browning, probably the world's most famous gunsmith, inventor of the Winchester rifle, among other guns. Even as a kid, I really hated looking at the dentist's office. Can you imagine? Sorensen collected some absolutely amazing musical instruments, including one orchestrion. These instruments have become so collectible, just this one room is probably worth more than Lagoon paid for the entire collection today. Okay, now it really gets fun. A Union Pacific depot. This was originally in Kaysville, Utah, then moved to Sorensen's property. Sorensen collected not just the depot, but he had a Denver and Rio Grande Western narrow gauge train as well. One coach, one boxcar, gondola, flat car, and a short caboose. Boy, did I love playing in that short caboose. A few years ago, Lagoon was able to add the toy train collection of David Sperry. Wow, one fabulous, fabulous, fabulous collection of toy trains. Check it out. As we saw earlier, the Victorian era had seen a huge growth in the production of toys because suddenly people were able to afford toys for their kids. And the toy train became the most popular toy. Now, does this seem somewhat familiar? This is the old original Bamberger train ride from the original Lagoon. Check it out. It's here in the depot. It was restored in 1976 as part of the bicentennial build-out, but they don't operate it anymore. They have put it on display here in the train station, but it's fully operational, and I, for one, would sure love to see this thing back on the tracks again. The narrow gauge Rio Grande equipment was sent over to the Utah State Railroad Museum a few years ago, and so it's no longer on display here at the Kaysville Union Pacific Depot in Lagoon. All that remains of the original Southeast Furniture Company is this logo that used to be in the sidewalk in front of the store, which is now part of the Monument Plaza here in Sugar House. The Sorensen Mansion still stands and is part of a very large condo development that was built on the land after the Sons of Utah Pioneers sold it. And here we see the site of the original Western town and Sorensen's fabulous, fabulous collection, which now resides at Lagoon. Well, there you go.
Oh my.
Pioneer Village.
Pioneer Village.
That is so cool. And it's cool because we've been going to it since we were kids in the old location, and even for the longest time there at Lagoon.
Right.
And
that's where I first went to it, was the Lagoon.
And I don't think very many people know the whole history of how that ended up there and where it came from. They don't know that it started off with this one guy's massive screwing around building a town in his backyard past the third swimming pool.
Yeah, imagine that.
And deciding he wanted a pioneer era village out in his backyard.
Yeah, imagine.
Not just with the buildings, but more importantly with the stuff.
Right.
All of the antiques, the cash registers, and butcher shop equipment and dental tools and barber shop equipment, just everything. Everything you needed to make a pioneer village. And that's exactly what it is, Pioneer Village.
Right.
700
So
east.
darn cool.
That's really cool.
Well, if you haven't been over to the channel, do pop over to the channel. That's Toyman Television here on YouTube. There's also toymantelevision.com.
Right.
The website. You can pop over there too.
Right.
And you can get to those things by clicking on the blue subscribe button, which is appearing here in just a few seconds right in here. Subscribe, and that makes you a subscriber, and it takes you to the channel where there's all kinds of fun and interesting stuff. And informative stuff. Well, we're not sure how you found this movie on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here again next week, where we're going to be at the Rat Fink reunion.
Right.
Yeah.
He's what brought us together.
He's what brought us together.
Yes.
We are children of the Rat Fink.
That's right.
So we will see you here again in 1 week with the Rat Fink reunion. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.